Hello everyone, I'm the narrator. If you're using this video to fall asleep, please like, subscribe and comment where you're from and what time you're listening. Now, relax and enjoy the story. Jenny wasn't a big fan of spontaneous plans, but when her best friend Amanda suggested they go for a nature walk, it sounded like a good idea. The sky was cloudy, but the chill in the air wasn't unpleasant. They needed a break from sitting around Jenny's living room, scrolling on their phones with the TV droning in the background. "Let's go before it gets dark," Amanda said, pulling on her jacket. Jenny sighed, but grabbed her own coat. It had been a while since she'd done anything outdoors, and she figured the fresh air would do her good. The trail they picked wasn't far from Jenny's house. It started off wide and clear, the ground covered in fallen leaves. The trees stretched high above them, their branches like thin arms against the grey sky. Birds chirped faintly, and the occasional squirrel darted across their path. "This is nice," Jenny admitted after a while. She liked how quiet it was out here compared to the busy streets near her home. "Told you," Amanda said with a grin. She pointed to a small break in the trail. "Let's try going that way. It's more adventurous." Jenny hesitated. "I don't know. Shouldn't we stick to the main path?" Amanda waved her off. "Come on! It'll loop back around. Besides, we've got time." Reluctantly, Jenny followed. The narrower path wound deeper into the woods. The trees were closer together here, and the air felt cooler. Jenny pulled her jacket tighter. "Are you sure this leads back to the main trail?" she asked after a few minutes. Amanda paused and looked around. "It should. I think this way?" She pointed to another break in the trail. Jenny's stomach twisted. "You think?" "Relax," Amanda said, though she didn't sound so sure herself. "We'll figure it out." But they didn't. The deeper they walked, the harder it was to tell one direction from another. The trees seemed thicker here, their bare branches weaving a tangled roof above. When Jenny checked her phone, there was no signal. "Let's go back the way we came," Jenny suggested, trying to keep her voice steady. Amanda nodded, for once looking nervous. They turned around, retracing their steps, or at least they tried. The paths all looked the same now, and the crunch of leaves under their boots was the only sound. "Wait," Jenny said after a while. "Where are we?" Amanda spun in a slow circle, her hands on her hips. "I don't know. I thought we were going the right way." Panic bubbled in Jenny's chest. She tried to think rationally. Maybe if they stayed put, they could figure out where they'd gone wrong. She turned to Amanda, but her friend was gone. "Amanda!" Jenny called, her voice sharp. No answer. She shouted again, louder this time. The trees swallowed the sound. Fear gripped her now. She looked around, turning faster and faster, but Amanda was nowhere in sight. How had she disappeared so quickly? Jenny's breathing quickened as she began walking, then jogging, then running. She shouted Amanda's name again and again, but the woods remained silent. Her footsteps sounded too loud, the crunch of leaves underfoot echoing strangely. It felt like something was off, like the forest was holding its breath. Eventually, exhausted, Jenny slowed and stumbled into a small clearing. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ground. She sat on a fallen log and tried to gather her thoughts. She had no idea where Amanda was or how far she'd gone from the main trail. Her stomach growled, and she realized she hadn't brought any food or water. Worse, the temperature was dropping. She checked her phone again. Still no signal. It was getting late, and she needed to decide what to do. She couldn't keep wandering in the dark. Her best chance was to stay put and wait until morning. Maybe Amanda would find her, or someone else would come along the trail. Reluctantly, she gathered a pile of leaves and dry grass to make a rough bed. Her jacket wasn't enough to keep the chill away, but it would have to do. As the last light faded, the forest grew eerily quiet. Jenny lay curled on her makeshift bed, staring into the darkness. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a branch made her flinch. She told herself it was just animals, but her heart raced all the same. And then she heard it, a voice, faint and distant, but unmistakable. "Jenny!" Her breath caught. It sounded like Amanda, but something about the tone was wrong, stretched and hollow. She sat up, straining to listen. The voice came again, closer this time. "Jenny, help me." Her blood ran cold. She wanted to believe it was Amanda, but fear rooted her in place. She scanned the darkness, but she could barely see a few feet ahead. The trees loomed like tall, thin shadows, and the voice came from somewhere within them. "Amanda," she whispered. Her voice shook. "Jenny!" The voice was louder now, and her heart hammered in her chest. Then she noticed something. A shape standing between the trees, just barely visible. It was tall and still, watching her. "Oh, who's there?" Jenny croaked, scrambling to her feet. The shape didn't move. It was hard to make out in the darkness, but it seemed wrong, like it didn't belong. The voice came again, right behind her this time. "Jenny!" She spun around, but there was nothing. The forest was empty, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching her. The air felt heavy, like the trees themselves were closing in. And the voice continued to call her name, dragging out each syllable, as if savoring her fear. Jenny sank to the ground, trembling and alone. She couldn't run anymore. All she could do was pray that the night would end, and that somehow she would survive until morning. But the night stretched on, endlessly. At some point, she must have dozed off because she woke to the faintest hint of dawn. The sky lightened just enough for her to see shadows shifting through the trees. They were moving, almost circling her clearing. She froze in place, hardly daring to breathe, as faint whispers joined the rustling sounds. "Leave!" the whispers hissed, like the wind had found a voice. But there was no wind, and the air felt too still. Gathering all her courage, Jenny stood up trembling and began to edge her way back to where she thought the main trail might be. Her legs ached and her throat was dry, but she kept going, fighting the urge to look over her shoulder. Every few steps, she'd hear a noise, a twig snapping, a branch swaying, even though there was no breeze. And still, she felt it, that heavy, suffocating sense of being watched. Suddenly, she stepped into a patch of open ground. Relief flooded her when she saw a signpost ahead, the kind that marked trail directions. She sprinted toward it, tears of exhaustion and hope in her eyes. But as she reached the sign, she froze. It was covered in deep scratches, as though clawed by something with massive, inhuman hands. Beneath the gouges, one word remained visible: "Run." A chill ran down her spine. The whispers grew louder, surrounding her now, an unseen crowd of voices urging her away. Jenny didn't hesitate. She ran, branches whipping her arms and face, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. She didn't stop, not even when the voices faded, not even when she stumbled back onto a familiar trail. Only when she saw the parking lot and her car in the distance did she collapse to her knees, sobbing. Amanda was never found.